Hello everyone. In this video, I'm going to show you how to use dynamic margins so that if you deploy your Godot game to a mobile device that has the notch for the camera or other sensors, your user interface won't be blocked by that. A few things to go over before we get started. The project settings here. For Godot's documentation, if you're trying to design a game to do on a mobile device that switches between landscape and portrait, they recommend doing a square size. So in this case, I did viewport width and height to 1080. You can also do like 720, so that way it's smaller. So if your assets are smaller, you don't have to worry about that so much. If we scroll down to stretch mode, I set that to canvas items and aspect to expand. Allow high DPI, set that to on. It's on by default. But then handheld orientation switches to sensor. That way your phone or tablet can actually switch between landscape and portrait mode. That's it for the project settings. In here, I just have a basic setup. I have a user interface with just 4 buttons pinned to each side. That way we can see when the camera notch is blocking it, for instance. And I also have a blue background just so it's more visible for the other areas. I threw both of those into a margin container, which I set the anchors to be full, and renamed it dynamic margins, gave it a script. And then in here, we're going to use a notification that Godot checks for whenever the screen changes, it calls a function that we need to create. So let's start with that. The function we're going to make is handle screen resize. And I like to call this in the ready function, so that way out of the gate, it adjusts the margins accordingly to whatever the user has their device in. And then the main function we're worried about for Godot to listen for is the notification. So the main thing we're looking for here is if what equals notification resize. If it was resized, we want to call this function. Now in this function, we're going to check to see if the OS name is iOS or Android. Otherwise, none of this gets applied. So you don't have to worry about it messing up your desktop versions of these games. And so the first thing we need to get is the OS name. System name equals os.getName. We then do an if statement. If OS name equals Android or last name equals iOS. But make sure you do capitalize those accordingly, otherwise this will not work. We then need to get the screen size. Get viewport rect dot size. Then for the phones and devices that have a safe area, which is the area that avoids that notch, we're going to calculate that. The safe area equals display server dot get display safe area. And we want to check for the safe area top, which is safe area dot position dot y. And then we want to check for the sides, safe area sides position dot x. So remember with Godot, x and y are both 0 at the very top left of the safe area in this case. We then want to check to see if the if the operating system is an iOS device. with the iOS devices, they have a feature that scales the pixels on the display. And if we don't account for that, then it will not look the way we want it to. So if OS name equals iOS, we want to calculate screen scale, which is the display server dot screen scale. And sometimes this can be a 1, sometimes it could be a 2 or a 3, so we want to account for that. Safe area top equals safe area top divided by screen scale. We do the same thing for sides. Safe area sides equals safe area sides divided by screen scale. We need the parentheses, but whatever. Okay, so now that that's set, we then want to check to see if the phone or device is in landscape or portrait mode. We're going to check for landscape first. So if screen size dot x is greater than screen size dot y. In that case, we're going to print change to landscape. That way we can actually see it in the terminal here. And I like to do a variable for margin. That way I just need to change it once here and it updates to the rest. Now this margin of 60 you may need to play around with depending on your resolution, but the 1080 by 1080, the 60 seems to work well for it. And at this point we're actually going to modify the container constraints. I'm sorry, we're going to modify the theme constant overrides. And we're going to do this for each one of the constraints. So I like to start with the top and work my way around. So by default, it's going to give you those 4 options. And for the top, I want to just do margin for landscape. So in this case, the notch for the camera is going to be off the left or the right. Add the constant override. Going to do the right. And then we're going to do safe area sides. And I like to also add a margin to this as well. Because it does add a little bit, but I like the extra padding. Bottom, set that to margin. Add the override, left. Safe area sides, margin. So that is all that we need to do for the landscape. And in this case, change to portrait. I'm just going to copy all these. Oops. Okay, not cut. Now keep in mind this is in portrait, so the notch is going to be on the top. So we want to switch this top to safe area top plus margin. Then the sides, the left and right, you can probably just leave it margin. If you do want to make it so it's not as big and bulky, you can do margin divided by 2 or 3, whichever the case may be. So with this safe area, the tablets typically don't have a notch. So their full screen is going to be available. So any kind of adjustments we make up here with the screen scaling, the safe area top is going to be 0. So it's always going to be 0 for tablets, but for the phones, this is very handy, necessary. Okay, so at this point, that's it. What we can do now is actually test this on an actual physical phone. To do that, what we want to do is do through Xcode active development. So that way we can change things really quick and test it out on our phone or tablets. If you're not sure how to do that, take a look at the previous video I created. I'll have a pin for it at the top or in the description as well. At this point, we want to go over to Xcode, choose your device, and start up. Then I will include pictures here, because if I try to just do a screen recording on my phone, you're not going to see that the notch is avoided. Because then if you do a screenshot or a video recording, that notch isn't there. So you'll be able to kind of guess it's far enough away, but at this point, that 60 value for 1080 is a good value. It hugs right up against that. You got just like a pixel or two of a difference. If you have a different resolution, you may need to mess with these margins. Okay, just a side note, I did try to make, I think for instance, when it's on landscape, when you have the camera notch to the left, I tried to make the right not so far, and it looks fine whenever it is the notch is on the left, but if you try to rotate it so the notch is on the right, it then starts getting cut off. So it doesn't update nicely. So it's better to just keep the left and the right match. So that way we know for sure that the notch is avoided regardless of which way they have the phone oriented. To show you what it looks like without the scale, I'm going to comment these out for now. And I'm going to show you a picture of what it looks like without that scale on my iPhone 13 Pro. So if you see that we got the big, it's a lot farther down than it was previously because of that scaling. We always want to include that scale factoring when working with iOS. Now, I don't have an Android device, so I'm not sure how much this avoids for that. You can always do another if statement for Android specifically if this is too much or too little. But hopefully that gives you a good starting point on how to adjust your game so that it avoids the notch for those devices. Thank you for watching and hope you have a good rest of your day.